What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Just before we start I want to say really quickly that I finally made a Twitter. You can tweet me or follow me at Gaming Curios, and I'll be using Twitter to play some fan games and some other cool stuff later in the week as well, so definitely check it out. Anyways, I've been playing Kalista a bunch on the PvE lately, and she's not only really cool, she's actually insanely strong, albeit a little bit difficult to play. Let's go through my first impressions and analysis of this new champion. The first thing you're going to notice with Kalista is that you get an item. So you use this item on a champion, who is going to be pretty much your support in every game. It doesn't have to be, but realistically, you're going to use it on your support. Otherwise your lane is going to suffer a ton. You can't change which champion this is done to at all either. You use it on them and that's it for the entire game. It gives you a passive to each other in Kalista's W and causes an interaction with her ultimate. Now her passive is one of the things that makes her incredibly strong. You can't cancel any auto attacks, and although your autos will do no damage if you lose vision, she gets to do a small dash comparable to Vayne's tumble after every single auto attack. The range on this passive scales with the level of your boots, so getting boots too early is pretty important, as well as some attack speed too, to help you proc your passive more often. The kiting ability that this creates for you is just absolutely stupendous. It's so insane. It requires some good mechanics, but if you can get used to it, it's so unbelievably powerful. You can zip and duck and dodge every single skill shot and kite and chase and everything. It's amazing. Now her Q is somewhat similar to a Varus Q, except it only pierces through the target if it kills the first target hit. So, in essence, it really just doesn't pierce through targets. You can kind of use it to wave clear occasionally if you get enough damage on it, but using it to hit opponents is fairly unreliable and can be pretty difficult, although it does do quite a bit of damage. Her Q also procs her passive too, meaning you can use it to help wall jumps and stuff like that. Maxing Q is potentially an option, but I didn't really like it that much since it's hard to land, and on PvE I laned against mostly other Kalistas pretty much all the time, so landing this ability was realistically impossible. So I chose to max E instead, but in reality I'd expect maxing Q or maxing E to both be potential options, especially depending on your matchup. Her W is really interesting, but kind of has the potential to not really be impactful. It has a passive and an active. The passive is actually really strong, and that's if the ally that you use your item on hits a target. If you then hit them within 1.5 seconds, you do a percent of their max health to them as magic damage. And the percent is actually pretty high too. It starts at 12% and then scales up to 20% of their max health at rank 5. Now, the active gives you kind of like a scout thingy that patrols an area in a straight line and gives vision while patrolling. It stays for quite a while too, so you can use it to avoid ganks as well as face checking and stuff like that. So it does make Kalista's lane pretty safe. At least in theory. I mean, the scout dies in 2 hits and patrols a pretty big range, so you could just as easily avoid it like you would avoid guards in like a Splinter Cell game just by waiting for them to walk in the wrong direction. So in solo queue, you're definitely going to be able to use it to have great map awareness and avoid ganks, since you get a scout every 60 seconds, and they last for quite some time, especially if they don't get cleared out. Although it can be a little difficult and take some planning, efficient use of this W is going to allow Kalista players to really just carry games, since your lane is going to be so safe while still being a very strong champion. And, of course, it helps you set up counter ganks. Her E is actually pretty powerful, and it's what I chose to max when I played her. Now, of course, I'm not the most skilled AD carry player by any means, so this may have been the wrong choice, but I found it to be relatively strong compared to maxing Q, since her E was much more reliable for dealing damage. It's really similar to Twitch's Expunge actually, except when you get a killing blow with it, the cooldown resets, and when you use it, it also applies a slow. You apply a spear with each auto and Q and W passive that hits the opponent. Each spear lasts for 4 seconds, and then you proc the E to deal damage based on how many spears they have on them. It actually does quite a bit of damage too when you build up the spears, as well as it's great to help CS and stuff. If you just barely don't do enough damage to a creep, you can use the E to finish it off. The slow is pretty useful too, since it really combos with her passive quite well to make her kiting potential just absolutely crazy. You can slow and have infinite dashes, making your kiting ability as well as her dueling ability quite powerful. And of course, it's worth mentioning that the range on her E is actually pretty significant too, comparable to Expunge. Her ultimate was tricky to understand at first, but the way it works is that you pull your ally in that you used your item on, and then they become untargetable and invisible. And not like Rengar or Evelyn invisible, but they actually just straight up vanish. And then the player that you dragged in with your item, fling themselves in the direction that they choose. And if they hit an opponent, that opponent gets knocked up. Now, this ultimate is absolutely disgusting. It's honestly just so crazy, since the range on it is really, really big. I mean, it's practically the whole screen. You can pull in and completely save your support by making them untargetable at the last second, or you can start a crazy initiation for a solid teamfight or a great pick. Using Kalista's ultimate on a tank with crowd control is probably the best initiation in the entire game. I highly recommend playing Kalista with initiate based supports, which is going to allow you to set up fights so incredibly easy. If you're playing with utility supports that don't really jump in, using your item on your initiator at the cost of your W passive in lane might just be worth it, honestly, since the initiations you can pull off with this thing are just so crazy and can be followed up so easily with more crowd control by your ally. It helps your ally cover absolutely massive distances while also providing crowd control. Since the range is just so big, it's just so amazing. Now, I'll be pretty honest with you. Apart from some weird bugs and stuff, Kalista right now is just straight up overpowered. Her laning is really, really good, since you can use your passive to dodge pretty much all skill shots, since the range on the dash is big enough, while the damage on her Q and E are really high. As long as you play with an initiation-based support like Leona, Braum, or Alistar, she is just insanely good. And she's really fun too. Her passive is awesome once you get the hang of it, and it feels really smooth too. And since her damage in lane is really high, and her fighting ability once you get your ultimate is insane, and of course really just almost unavoidable due to the huge range. So once you hit level 6, if you can get a lead, it's just so easy to snowball, because you can go in when your ultimate is up, while using your scouts to avoid ganks and stuff too, and she's just strong throughout all phases of the game. And her mana costs aren't that high either, so you can poke and trade quite often and quite well. As far as teamfighting goes with Kalista, if you have even just an ounce of mechanical skill when it comes to orb walking in you, Kalista is going to be, by far, your new favorite AD carry. Her teamfights are really, really strong. You have the ability to kite so easily and dodge a big portion of skill shots using your dashes. Not to mention that you can just initiate with your ultimate and set up some easy fights, as well as potentially pick out on enemies caught out. Her passive can be difficult to use though. I know I definitely was not the best at it. But in the hands of good mechanical players, her kiting ability, combined with initiation and pick potential, is going to be so ridiculous when it comes to carrying games. Honestly, if she doesn't get nerfed, I'd expect her to be really, really good in the current meta. And even if she does get nerfed, she's still going to be incredibly strong due to the way her ultimate works. Either way, if you're a strong mechanical player, this is definitely going to be the champion for you due to the raw outplay and playmaking potential Kalista